Welcome to Books and Bites, your shortcut to big ideas. Stay, listen, and level up one book at a time. Today we're diving deep into a book that feels, well, maybe more relevant now than ever. George Orwell's 1984.
Yeah, it's a novel that's kind of seeped into our culture, but I think a lot of folks reduce it to just like, Big Brother is watching you. There's so much more to unpack there, especially I think as technology gives us all these, new ways to actually monitor and control information.
Okay, so let's unpack it then. For those who maybe haven't read it or need a refresher, we're in Oceania, right? One of three superstates that are constantly at war. This is where the party, with Big Brother as its mysterious figurehead, controls basically every aspect of life.
And it's not even just like behavior they control, it's thoughts, it's language, even history itself. Like they literally rewrite the past to fit their narrative, and anyone who remembers differently is a thought criminal. That's where our protagonist Winston Smith comes in.
Winston, yeah. He's this kind of ordinary guy working for the Ministry of Truth, literally rewriting history, but secretly he hates the party. Even thinking rebellious thoughts is a crime here, but Winston just can't help but crave freedom.
He represents that like flicker of humanity in us all, right? That yearning for individual expression. And what's so fascinating is how Orwell shows this yearning through Winston's relationship with Julia.
Right. Their secret affair becomes this act of defiance against the party's control over everything, including love. They risk everything for these kind of stolen moments of freedom. But is it truly freedom in a world where even thoughts are policed?
That's where it gets really chilling. The party doesn't just want, like, obedience. They want total submission, even down to your inner thoughts. Orwell uses this idea of doublethink to show how they achieve this. It's this ability to hold two completely contradictory beliefs simultaneously and accept both as true.
So someone can believe the party's always right, even when they're clearly lying, and somehow make peace with that in their own mind.
Exactly. It's a way of short-circuiting critical thinking, making it impossible to even question the party's narrative. And to enforce this, they introduce newspeak, right? Which is a language designed to eliminate words that could express rebellion or independent thought.
So if you can't even think the words freedom or rebellion, how can you even conceive of those concepts? It's like they're trying to reshape reality itself.
Precisely. They're controlling the very tools of thought. And it's through these tools that they create this atmosphere of constant paranoia and suspicion, which leads us to one of the most pivotal points in the book, I think, the introduction of Emmanuel Goldstein and the Brotherhood.
The Brotherhood. The supposed underground resistance movement that becomes Winston's glimmer of hope. He clings to this idea that there are others who feel the way he does. But is it real or just another tool of the party's control?
That's the brilliant ambiguity that Orwell kind of weaves in there. The party's constantly warning of Goldstein as this ultimate enemy, but we never know for sure if he exists or if it's all a fabrication to trap dissenters, like Winston.
And it works.
Yeah.
Winston is so desperate for connection, for a sense of belonging, that he falls right into their trap.
It highlights the power of hope, even in the darkest of times, but also how easily that hope can be manipulated. And this manipulation becomes all too real when Winston and Julia's, secret haven is shattered. Remember Mr. Charrington, the kindly old shopkeeper who rents them the room above his shop?
Yeah, he seems so harmless, almost nostalgic for the past, which I guess is its own form of rebellion in Oceania.
Precisely. And that's what makes the reveal of his true identity as a thought police agent so devastating. It just reinforces this idea that no one can be trusted, that anyone, even the seemingly harmless, could be an informant.
It creates this chilling sense of paranoia where you're constantly second-guessing everyone and everything, even your own thoughts.
And this paranoia leads us to, I think, the most terrifying part of the book, the Ministry of Love, where Winston and Julia are taken not for romantic love, but for the party's very twisted version of it.
Yeah, the Ministry of Love, it's one of those classic Orwellian, double meanings where the opposite is true. It's here that Winston comes face to face with O'Brien, the party official he once believed to be a fellow rebel.
And this is where Orwell takes us deep into the psychology of torture and control. O'Brien isn't just some, sadist. He's a master manipulator who understands how to break a person's spirit and rebuild them in the party's image.
And he does this through a combination of physical torture, psychological manipulation, and something truly terrifying, Room 101.
Room 101, yeah. It's not just about inflicting pain. It's about exploiting your deepest, most primal fears. The party understands that everyone has something they fear above all else, and they use that fear to break you, to force you to betray your own values, your own loved ones.
It's like they're saying, we don't just want your obedience, we want your soul.
Exactly. And this brings us to one of the most heartbreaking moments in the book, I think. Winston's betrayal of Julia in Room 101. Faced with his deepest fear, he chooses self-preservation, even if it means betraying the one person who gave him a reason to rebel.
It's a gut-wrenching moment that shows how, fear can corrupt even the strongest bonds. But what happens after this? Does Winston just become another mindless drone for the party?
Well, that's where we enter the final, and perhaps the most disturbing stage of Winston's journey. He's released back into society, seemingly cured of his rebellious tendencies. But what's so chilling is that it's not just like outward conformity. The party has literally reshaped his mind, his very being.
So it's not enough to just act like you love Big Brother. You have to actually feel it. That just messes with your head, man.
It's the ultimate victory for the party. They've eradicated Winston's individuality, his capacity for critical thought. He even encounters Julia again, but the love they shared is gone, replaced by this indifference, even a kind of disgust.
It's like they've lobotomized their souls, that scene where they meet in the park, and it's clear they've both been broken. It's more terrifying than any physical torture.
It shows just how effective the party's methods are. They haven't just silenced dissent. They've erased the very desire for it. And this leads us to that haunting final scene in the Chestnut Tree Cafe,
where Winston sits alone drinking Victory Gin, gazing at the telescreen with a sense of love for Big Brother. How is that even possible after everything he's been through?
It's the culmination of the party's psychological manipulation. They've broken him so completely that he now embraces the system that destroyed him. He's become a true believer in doublethink, accepting contradictory ideas without question.
It's like Orwell is saying that the most effective form of control isn't physical force. It's getting people to control themselves, to love their own oppression.
Exactly. It's a chilling warning about the power of propaganda and the fragility of truth. And what's even more unsettling, I think, is how relevant this feels today, even though the world hasn't literally become Oceania.
Right. We don't have telescreens in every home, but we do have smartphones, social media algorithms tracking our every click, and the way information is filtered and manipulated online. It feels very Big Brother-ish sometimes.
Yeah. It's not just surveillance either. Think about the way language is used to shape public opinion, how words are twisted and redefined to suit certain agendas. We're bombarded with so much information, much of it conflicting or deliberately misleading, that it's hard to even know what to believe anymore.
It's like we're living in a constant state of doublethink, forced to accept these contradictory narratives, to question our own senses. You can't even have a civil discussion about politics or social issues anymore without someone accusing you of being brainwashed or spreading fake news.
It's exhausting, and it creates this climate of fear and suspicion, which is exactly what the party in 1984 thrives on. When everyone is afraid to speak their mind or even to think critically, then those in power can control the narrative unchallenged.
So what can we do about it? Is there any way to resist this kind of insidious control, or are we all doomed to become Winston Smith staring blankly at a screen-loving Big Brother?
That's the question 1984 forces us to confront. And I think the first step, as cliche as it sounds, is awareness. We need to be aware of the ways in which we're being manipulated, the subtle and not so subtle ways in which power is exercised through information control.
So we have to pay attention to be critical thinkers, to question the sources of information, to seek out diverse perspectives. Basically the opposite of what Winston does after his reintegration.
Exactly. We need to resist the urge to retreat into our own echo chambers, where we only hear information that confirms our existing biases. Engaging in thoughtful debate, even with people we disagree with, is crucial for maintaining a healthy democracy.
But isn't that getting harder and harder these days? It feels like everyone is so entrenched in their own ideology that there's no room for nuance or compromise.
It is challenging, but that's why it's even more important to resist the pull towards polarization.
Right.
We need to cultivate empathy, the ability to understand and even appreciate perspectives different from our own. That's the antidote to the kind of black and white thinking that the party in 1984 promotes.
And what about the surveillance aspect? It feels like we've already surrendered so much of our privacy in the name of convenience or security. Is it even possible to reclaim that?
It's a tough battle, but not a hopeless one. We can support organizations that are fighting for strong privacy laws. We can be more mindful of the data we share online, and we can demand transparency from those who collect and use our information.
It's like choosing to write in a diary like Winston, even if you know it might be discovered. It's a small act of defiance, a way of asserting your individuality in the face of an increasingly intrusive system.
Exactly. Every choice we make, even seemingly insignificant ones, can be an act of resistance. And these small acts multiplied across millions of individuals can have a real impact.
So even in a world that feels increasingly Orwellian with all the surveillance and information control, there's still hope.
There's always hope, as long as people are willing to question, to resist, to fight for freedom and truth. There's hope. 1984 is a warning, but it's also a call to action. It's a reminder that the future isn't predetermined, that we have the power to shape our own destiny.
Yeah, it is. It's a heavy thought, that the future isn't just this fixed thing. But you're right, 1984 isn't all doom and gloom. There are these glimmers of resistance throughout, even in Winston's, darkest moments.
Absolutely. One that really strikes me is Winston's diary itself. In a world where individual thought is literally outlawed, that simple act of writing, of recording his own experiences and emotions, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, even though the party ultimately finds and destroys it, it symbolizes Winston's attempt to just hold on to his own truth, his own identity. It's like a little rebellion in itself.
Precisely. It shows that the human spirit can find ways to resist even in the most oppressive systems. And that's a crucial message for us today, I think, as we navigate this complex world of information overload and digital surveillance.
So for our listeners out there who haven't read 1984, why should they pick it up now in the 21st century? What makes this book so relevant today?
I think 1984 isn't just a dystopian novel. It's like a mirror reflecting our own anxieties about the world we live in. It forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about power, about manipulation, about the fragility of freedom. It's a warning, yes, but also a call to action.
A call to be aware, to be critical thinkers, to engage in meaningful dialogue and to fight for the values that we hold dear. Basically, to make sure that the dystopia of 1984 remains fiction and doesn't become our reality.